Hey Matt, we're live.
We are. Hey,
How's it
George,
going?
how are you?
I'm good. I'm at home today, but I'm standing up today. I have a little bit of a new setup here. We do a lot of these webinars, and usually I'm tucked in a little tidy chair and I can't move. So now I get to move around a little bit. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and I'm back in the studio again for this webinar session. And for those of you guys for those of you that are just joining us now, welcome. And we're gonna give it probably a few minutes just to wait for everyone else to finish trickling in before we get started on today.
That's right. We always give a few minutes off the top because people tend to be a few minutes late, which is fine. And I encourage you, if you're watching on Crowdcast right now, say hello. There's a chat sidebar in Crowdcast where you can let us know where you're from, what you're interested in seeing. And throughout the broadcast today, we're going to have polls coming up asking you some questions. So we want to find out who you are and why you're watching the show. And hopefully we can take some of that knowledge and give you what you want to see here today. Because there's probably going to be a lot of questions about what we're talking about in terms of lecture capture and whether you're a teacher or an administrator. Those questions are kind of different. So
now, if you have a question,
yeah.
It's also important to note that we do have a Q&A section here in Crowdcast where we do recommend that you throw in all of your different questions. You can also upvote them so that they get higher priority if they're more urgent to be answered. But if you throw your questions in the comments section, there is a chance that they do get missed. So just make sure to use that Q&A section to ask your questions.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's already a poll up now, which is what's your role in education? And I'm sure a lot of you are going to identify as administrators or IT tech support, but then you're going to have teachers as well. And today we're really going to be talking to, mostly I'm going to say to you IT and administrator people, because we understand you want to set up a system that is hands-free for your teachers. Matt, you must have talked to a lot of IT people over the years talking about how they want a bulletproof system because they don't trust teachers to necessarily deal with any technical issues that might come up.
Absolutely. And even more so now in 2020, as the world has been thrusted into the online medium and domain. So if you guys do, again, have questions, that are not too network specific, we could certainly answer your questions. But if we can't answer your questions today, then you can always throw your emails, questions at info@epifan.com, and myself or another member of the support team will be happy to answer those at a later moment.
Yeah, and we've been going through this ourselves, trying to set everybody in our company up to work remotely and run broadcasts like I'm doing from my living room today. It puts a stress on our IT team. So we've been through that pain here today, and hopefully we can tell you a little bit about what we've learned to set up. In our case, it's more of a broadcast scenario, but lecture capture is not all that different from what we're going to be doing today. So,
absolutely.
We can share some of those pain points.
So what do you think? Do you think we should get started?
Sure, let's roll. Let's run through our agenda and let everybody know what we're going to be talking about.
All right. So we're going to be talking a little bit more of the focus on our beautiful Pearl family of products today, and we're going to be looking at a few different things. So first off, what is hands-off lecture capture capabilities? What are kind of some of the benefits? And why hardware-based lecture capture, right? What are some of the differences between software and hardware, and why would we recommend hardware over software? Also think about things that you need for the actual setup, things that you may not have considered, things that you may want to be cognizant about, and of course, how to set up that lecture capture solution in the most easy-friendly solution that involves the least amount of maintenance. And then finally, we're going to end things off with your questions. If you guys do have any, again, throw them in the question and answer section down below, and keep an eye out for notifications for any polls that will be coming up throughout this webinar.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to setting up your lecture capture environment, it could be that you want to set up in a home space like we're doing here today, or at least I am, or maybe you want to set up in a physical classroom. The good news is the solution we're going to talk about today is going to work for both of those environments.
Right.
So it should work for you.
So let's talk a little bit about what a hands-off or hands-free lecture capture solution is. Basically, there's no tech setup that needs to take place before any class can begin. It's already in place. There's no interaction with the actual solution that's needed. So being able to start-stop lecture captures are completely hands-free. You can wash your hands free as an instructor within the classroom space, which is kind of like the idea. It's the most ideal solution to be able to just walk into a classroom, turn around and go, "Hello, everyone. How are you doing today?" And just get started on your actual content.
Hmm. That is the ideal for sure. And everything we're going to talk about today, while it's true, we're talking about a completely hands-off lecture capture experience. You can also set it up so a really low-touch experience. So maybe all your professor has to do is push one button to get it going.
Right.
So there's a few degrees of how hands-off it is. It could be completely hands-off where everything is scheduled, and that makes it completely, like I said, completely hands-off. Or just a little bit of interaction. You want your professor to come into a room, push a button to get started. We can show you how that works too.
Yep. And of course, not needing to interact with your recorded content after the fact, or any sort of webcasting event after the fact, makes it really easy for you to simply just walk out of the room and carry on with your day. So as an IT professional, someone who works in support in IT, I do understand the frustrations, the challenges, the occasional headaches that you're going to face when trying to find the perfect solution. So what does a hands-free lecture capture solution look from your perspective, or my perspective in this case? Well, first off, it streamlines the entire deployment process. Having a dedicated hardware solution means it's easy to throw into a room, it's easy to remotely configure and manage. So this can be done from a centralized location, being able to access multiple different classrooms or multiple different environments, being able to even do things like schedule your recording and your streaming events, all from the comfort of your desk without ever having to step into a room or having to coordinate with any other members of staff. And I don't know about you, George, but I think it's kind of my favorite way to do things these days.
To do things what? Like to do it remotely, or have it all streamlined so that you don't have to be involved in it?
To involve the least amount of hands, to be able to do it most autonomously, and all from the comfort of my desk or my couch if I'm working from home.
That's my go-to. Yeah, that's right. Well, I can tell you, I've spent time in IT departments in universities, and I remember the door. A lot of people came to the door quite often. They'd be knocking on the door saying, "Hey, my headphones are not working. I'm supposed to do this lecture. I can't get the mic working on them." Just these little tiny requests, but no doubt they must add up and drive IT people crazy, especially when they're really simple problems that they expect other people to be able to fix. So whatever we can do to help smooth out some of those wrinkles so you don't have as many people knocking on your door, I think that's going to be a win.
Yeah, and of course, as you know, COVID has thrust us into this online world, and you've had to quickly adapt to doing online lecture capture classrooms. It also comes with a little bit of a learning curve, and so there's a little bit of training and research and application that needs to take place. If you're doing this at a software level or a hardware level, it's not necessarily as simple as just pressing a button and you're ready to go. It does require a little bit of understanding and basic research. So the purpose of a standalone lecture capture solution is to eliminate the majority of that process by simply telling them, well, there's nothing for you to do, or all you have to do is press one button, which makes this the most ideal solution in almost every case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest kind of benefit that I've seen from dedicated hardware solutions is just not having to put so much focus on updates and maintenance and replacements for any of your gear. So,
for sure, yeah. We see a lot of customers who come to us and they have had one version of a lecture capture system, but it was either too complex or too many failure points in it. So
right.
Simplifying that was almost always like their first question. Like, how do I simplify this? It's kind of complex.
Right. So there's two major categories. You know, we've talked about this often in other webinars. If you guys are active, attendees of our webinars or of our live show, we've talked about this multiple times, comparing the differences between hardware and software encoding. And the most common one that you're probably seeing today is software encoding, as the world has been thrust online. Typically, you'll notice as the most popular streaming software that we've seen, or recording software, is OBS Studio, which is a free available open source platform that has been widely used just to get people online. It's particularly popular within the gaming world. And it's a simple, relatively intuitive software application. Now, software application means it needs to run onto a computer, so you also need to make sure that you have things like a dedicated laptop or desktop computer that's able to run this software application. So there's a couple of external factors that you need to consider, such as the physical hardware that the software is going to be running on, And what sort of video and audio sources are you going to be connecting to your computer to be able to get this lecture capture experience? I don't know about you, George, but I've always enjoyed the software application side, but I've had a few times where my computer has crashed for no apparent reason, or a sudden operating system like Windows update has taken place. And
Oh, for sure, for sure. But they are really powerful. And if you're a technical person or if you're an IT person, you're going to find them pretty great because you can kind of do whatever you want with them. They're infinitely scalable. But as soon as you ask somebody else to use it who's not an AV person or an IT person, that's when it really gets scary because they're just not built, they're not tools built to have a simple success path to them.
right,
They're ultimately configurable and powerful, but prone for failure in a myriad of ways.
right, and you're just adding.
People make them work, but
Sorry, George.
that's okay. I mean, I'm saying that people do make them work, but I don't see people make them work and then train other people to use them who are not technical people.
Right, so it ends up adding an extra layer of complexity and a little extra layer of training or self-training that needs to come into place.
Mm-hmm.
But if you compare that to a hardware encoder, these guys are completely purpose-built, right? They're designed for recording and streaming of video and audio content. They tend to have a little bit less in the way of configurability. They're a little bit more locked in place, where there might be some features you might want to see that may or may not be available. But the trade-off is ultimately far more beneficial because it's reliable, it's stable, there's no software application updates, there's no operating system updates that need to take place, and ultimately you're getting everything in a single box or in a box or two as opposed to multiple separate layers of complexity.
For sure. Matt, there's a new poll that just went up on Crowdcast. Let me just read it here. Take a look and vote if you're watching. Does your school use hardware encoders or software encoders? So if you haven't invested in an lecture capture system, we'd love to know. Sorry, if you have invested in one, we'd love to know what you're using right now and how you feel about it. So don't forget, you can put comments in the chat here, and we'll answer all those comments. We'll answer your questions too. So jump right in.
So we've got here a little bit of a comparison here between hardware and software encoders. So on the left, obviously, we have images of our Pearl family of products. On the right, we've got things like the Panopto and Kaltura software application that allows you to be able to do recording and webcasting events. So George, what are some advantages that you would typically find with a dedicated hardware solution? And this isn't, necessarily particular to our devices. There are certainly other platforms available for hardware, but what are the best reasons to invest into a hardware solution that you find?
Well, I would maybe put it into context around Kaltura and Panopto. So we're talking about how these might work with a CMS like Kaltura and Panopto. And you could use a laptop solution with running the Panopto software or the Kaltura software. If you just want to capture your webcam in your computer and you want to be able to send that footage to Panopto or Kaltura, using that software is probably just fine for you. But as soon as you want to expand that to a point where you want to bring in external sources, you want to bring in a nicer camera image, or maybe you want to bring in a document camera or a whiteboard camera or a smart board or professional audio, you want to bring in microphones. As soon as you add that level of production to it, when you go beyond just you looking into your laptop camera and you want to add those other sources, I think at that point, a hardware solution, you're just going to find it way easier to use. So if that's the kind of setup you're trying to go for, I think you should probably take a look at a hardware solution because you might find it solves some of your problems that are otherwise kind of complicated to set up in a computer-based software solution.
Right. It basically just creates a little bit more flexibility with a dedicated hardware piece because you can disconnect and reconnect and change and add and remove any sorts of video hardware and software devices, cameras, mixers, direct connections from microphones, USB audio and video sources. So you're not limited with a dedicated hardware device strictly to professional cameras. You can also utilize webcams in those environments if needed.
It's true. You're right.
I also like it a lot better because it tends to be relatively easy to use. Right? There's typically start-stop buttons for recording and streaming. You don't have to navigate through a bunch of different menus to change all those specific settings if it's paired with a platform or registered with a platform like Panopto or Kaltura.
It's purpose built. It doesn't do that many things. It's designed to do video production or lecture capture in this case. So you don't have to worry about other applications running on it that are going to conflict and suddenly your audio source is going to change. Those things just don't really happen on a purpose built encoder like Pearl.
From an IT perspective too, I find hardware encoders are actually pretty intuitive and easy to configure. And once they're configured on top of that, they're even easier to manage. So from a teacher or a faculty member perspective, it's a relatively hands-free solution for you, and it's a little bit more focused on the IT team to be able to set all of that up for you, and it's kind of a set it and forget it type scenario.
I hope so. That's what I would like if I was running IT for a university.
Of course. Now, I mean, if you don't have a hardware solution yet and you're relying on software solutions, I mean, there are definitely some advantages with that as well. First off, it's a lower upfront cost. So we certainly understand that, well, as you're maybe waiting for approval on a budget or maybe just availability of hardware as the demand has been so high, using a software solution with something like a webcam is pretty easy and pretty quick to get started. It's also, let's face it, really readily available. If you've got a webcam on your laptop, you're already set and ready to go. Now, if you're running a desktop-based computer, you might need to purchase a third-party webcam. Something from Logitech, as an example, might be considered as a webcam source you want to use, or you can use something like a USB capture card if you want to use a more prosumer professional camera, or even just a DSLR that you have at home. I know a lot of people who have DSLR cameras that either do amateur or professional photography, and those are a great camera source in a pinch.
We have some people saying hi in the chat here, and Dan is telling us that he has 3 Pearl twins. I guess the rack mount units installed in his instance. So Dan, we're going to walk through a couple of the ways you can do lecture capture, so just bear with us. We're going to get to some more heavy Pearl stuff. But Matt, maybe we can just walk through basically what's a software setup look like and what's a Pearl hardware setup look like?
Sure. So from a software perspective, it might look something like this. Now, this is a slightly more complicated look. This goes a little bit beyond what you would consider just a standard webcam setup where you might be using an internal microphone of your computer. So in this case, we've got 3 capture cards. You're going to be looking at a powerful desktop computer in order to accommodate this. But we have a camera that's looking directly at the presenter. You have maybe a USB audio capture card that's going into your computer to capture all of that microphone audio or just better audio quality in general. Maybe a document camera, maybe the output of a different PowerPoint slide presentation. It ends up creating a more beefy or a larger requirement for a beefy computer in order to get this software solution up and ready to go. There's also a lot of separate layouts and layers that you need to create in order to be able to do the switching between these specific video sources. You have other things to consider too. If the computer is powerful enough, is your software up to date? Are you running into any conflicts or issues with the video devices and audio devices that are connected to the computer? So keep that in mind, that the more complex your setup, the more you're going to want to probably drive away from a software-based solution. Now when you compare that to something like a dedicated hardware encoder like a Pearl Mini or a Pearl 2, then everything is centralized. You connect your video and audio sources directly to the unit. The device is configured once, and then you don't really have to make any changes. If you've got a laptop that's showcasing a PowerPoint presentation, well, the laptop can change at any point in time, still use that same video source input, and there's no major changes that need to take place at a hardware level.
What you and I are doing here today as well. I have a Pearl on my desk here, which I'm running an SRT stream out to you in the studio. So we're both following a kind of a similar setup to what you're showing here today.
Yep. And we have in our case, we have a producer in-house that's producing the webinar for today, and he is nowhere near the studio where I'm currently sitting in. And I had to do 0 configuration for the actual webinar today. So as you can imagine, me as a faculty member coming into a classroom, someone else can remotely configure and manage the device if they need to be on site at the time. But if it's a scheduled type event, then you really don't need anything else. Just walk in and get ready to go.
Yeah, if you have any questions about how we're doing this show today, we'll stick around after our presentation and take any questions you might have. But let's jump into this lecture capture setup that you're talking about.
So what do you need? First and foremost, if you're using our products, you're going to need a Pearl Mini or a Pearl 2. Now, some of you guys out there also might have the original Pearl as well, which will also work for this use case. So any legacy or previous versions or current versions of our Pearl family products are set and ready to go. The other thing you're probably going to need is a content management system like Panopto or Kaltura to take advantage and leverage our CMS integration capabilities. Pearl is a standalone, all-in-one production solution that has the ability of capturing multiple video and audio sources for recording and streaming purposes. Right? They're very versatile systems. You can think of having an entire rack's worth of gear just in a single tiny box. This could be a dedicated switcher. This could be an encoder. This could be a streamer, a decoder if it's in a more professional class settings. We basically just try to make it as easy as humanly possible. This was something that I got to discover when I first started with the company, having previously dealt with racks and racks of equipment. So this is kind of a nice change.
And they were designed ultimately so that you didn't need as many components in your kit. We have a lot of uses in the live event production space where people are doing conferences and using Pearl 2s, but also in the education space, it's just as prevalent there because people like how tidy it is and the fact that it has a touch screen, so your teachers or your users can go in and use it without having to navigate their way through admin pages or find URLs or doing any of that stuff. So the touchscreen seemed to be a really big selling point for this product because of the teacher capabilities, or the students for that matter, who can just come in and push one button and start streaming. Right. Or no buttons, as you're about to explain.
Exactly. And as you can tell just by taking a quick glance, you just have multiple options for connecting your video and audio sources, which again will make your life significantly easier. So if you're not familiar with what a content management system is, or CMS is, it's kind of a web portal that allows you to store, manage, and create content, your video content, for either lecture capture solutions, or if you're in an enterprise world trying to provide training and resources for your employees and staff. It's an awesome way of being able to promote learning for anybody and everybody. You can add quiz, you can add interactive polls. There's typically a live chat option. There's forums, anything available for just communication purposes, focus groups, things of that nature. And some of the most intuitive and focused search options I've ever seen in my entire life. George, you've had an option, you've had the opportunity of working with the CMS, if I do recall, right? In some of your further education?
Well, through some, yeah, that's right. Through some schools, I work with an LMS, which is kind of the receiving end of all that CMS content. But I could just imagine trying to manage all of the video content if you have 10 teachers, 20 teachers, students, other people making content, and it all lives under one umbrella. How eventually it's just going to become messy, right?
Of course.
So I think having a CMS just allows you to organize those assets and push them where you need them to go, or have all of that automated for you, so you don't need to do spend all this time moving files around, because ultimately you will purposely get hit by a bus because it will drive you crazy.
Of course. If you want to get just a simple idea of how amazing and intuitive the search options out of content management systems like Kaltura and Panopto are, if you were to search even just the word variable, it will find the search options for the exact moment when that word was uttered, when it was seen as a PowerPoint presentation, recorded as a transcript, or could just be a passing thought or a passing note within that specific classroom setting. So it'll take every single instance that it can find and allow you to narrow that focus even further based on very intuitive search results.
That's pretty cool. I thought you were saying it would know the thoughts of the people as well. So but no.
That would be the next step, the next iteration. Right. But you have to sign a privacy waiver at that point.
Right, and we have to wear some little sensors all over your head.
Right, so hopefully, if you're not already a user of Kaltura and Panopto, it's something that you're considering using in your educational institution. Mm-hmm. These are pretty important to be able to get you set up and ready to go with our hardware solutions like Pearl Mini and Pearl 2. So what does that really look like from start to finish? If you're an IT professional, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to connect all of your video and audio sources together. You're going to configure the device and register it to those specific platforms, and then everything will be recorded and or streamed directly to the platforms themselves.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we see people using them for different applications. Some people will put them in a classroom where they don't move. It's a fixed installation. We see other people doing them in a more mobile way where people come and check out the unit and a camera and off they run to an empty room somewhere to use it. Or it's a studio environment where you want it to look really good and you've got lights and it's more of a production for doing, what would you call those? Just more polished, high polished videos.
Thomas More is a great example of utilizing our hardware solutions with content management systems to get a more hands-free solution.
That's right. Yeah, they're a Belgian-based school, and they use our Pearl Minis throughout the campus for students, for teachers, and they also appreciate, I think, that you can manage those devices from a central office because they're all, as long as they are on the network, the IT people can log into those devices and configure them as needed.
So with a CMS, if you're, let's say, installing a Pearl Mini into a permanent installation, or maybe you're utilizing the VESA mounts on the back to put it against a podium or against a wall, you connect the device up to the network, you add all of your video and audio sources, you jump into the user interface, and you register it to your platform, whether it's Kaltura or Panopto. Once you've done that, the device is essentially what I would like to call a slave encoder. It will respond to whatever you have set as a schedule. So if you're on Panopto or Kaltura, you go in and create your scheduling events for webcasting or for VOD style events. These events can be reoccurring or one-time events, and it will automatically query a calendar periodically throughout the hour, and then at the time of that specific recording or webcasting event will automatically start and stop for the appointed time. So this makes it completely hands-free. But there's also a slightly modified version. So let's say a faculty member needs to come into a room to do maybe an unscheduled event. These are known as ad hoc events, and you have the ability to create these specific ad hoc events either from the device configuration menus through the web user interface, or it can even be done from the touchscreen using standard login credentials, which ends up giving you far more control and also a far more empowering solution as a faculty member. So IT doesn't need to step in to do any sort of extra configuration for you. It's simply just come in, log in, and start.
Matt, why don't you show them that picture? There's a picture of your handsome arm reaching into our touchscreen, I know in a later slide, where you can see how there's a little touch keypad that comes up and the student or the teacher can log in that way and start that event.
Yep. So I'm just going to go
I know
back once.
I know we worked. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say we worked really hard with Panopto and Kaltura to develop all of these features, and they've given us feedback that lets us know that I haven't tried all the other hardware encoders out there, but I think our integration might be the most comprehensive for little things like being able to log in right from the touchscreen, all the small things that we allow you to do with your Kaltura or Panopto installation. It's pretty detailed. There's a lot of really small details. So if you want a demo of this, if you're interested in how these work together, one of our salespeople or our support people like Matt can walk you through all the bits and bobs of exactly how that integration works.
Yep. So just like you'll see here on this, this slide that I have up here, when you registered your device, you'll notice a little calendar icon that shows up along the bottom of the screen. When you tap that, it gives you the option to either create an event, or if you have an upcoming event, you can even start that event early. Once you click on the create event option, it brings you to the next slide, which allows you to log in for the device, which if you're an IT member and it's just a single person that's using this specific setup, you can predefine the login credentials so they never have to actually log into the unit. They simply just hit create event and it'll take you to the next page in order to start your webcasting or VOD style event. If you want to start the event early that you have predefined, simply click on the start event and it'll automatically start doing a count up timer flashing in red and black. Alternatively, just to let you know, hey, you have an active event that's currently taking place. And finally, everything can just be done directly from the platform. So we have here as just an example of the Panopto platform. You would see something relatively similar with Kaltura, where you have the option of being able to go in and create either that recording or webcasting event. And everything is centralized. So once you're all set and ready to go, you can simply manage all of your video recorded content directly from the platform. You can access all of your devices that you have registered on that specific platform directly from it. So if Kaltura, you have the ability to go in and see all of the listed devices you have registered for Pearl Mini and Pearl 2, and you can do the exact same thing with Panopto.
People saying hi in the chat here. From Hawaii and India and Norway. We have a Magnus telling us that he has 12 Pearl Minis set up for Panopto to use next semester. And he said the setup was really sweet. So that's great to hear, Magnus. If you have any questions about the integration or anybody else has questions, be sure to add them to the chat. There's actually an ask a question function as well in Crowdcast, and we'll answer those at the end of the broadcast today.
Now we are.
So thanks for saying hi.
Absolutely. Now we are pretty much at the end of this first major bit of content. I'm curious to hear what sort of questions we have already. If you guys haven't answered the polls yet, we do recommend you going in there and taking a peek and answering them for us. It really helps us be able to understand what you're looking for, what needs you might have, and how we can best fit and target future webinars for you guys.
Mm-hmm. So I can see here now from the polls that are up, Matt, that most people, 75%, are an identify as IT or tech support as their role. And it's a complete mix of how people are using hardware versus software encoders. So that one's all over the board. We have quite a variety there. And then we have some people who are Panopto users, a good amount who are using another CMS. Not too many votes there, but let us know what kind of content management system you've deployed at your school. We'd love to know that, and we can talk to it. I see more votes coming in now, so that's great.
Now, I do have one offside I do want to mention. If you're not an active CMS user, maybe you're using just simply something like an LMS or learning management system, independently from any other configuration, there are some additional things you can do without direct integration with our products. So as an example, we have a feature called automatic file upload that would allow you to automatically upload recorded content or streamed content directly to a network file storage destination. So as an example, if you decided to do a recording event directly to the unit, it could then be automatically uploaded to a network file or folder option, which is linked to your learning management system. So it kind of eliminates the manual need for uploading the content at the end of the day. So it's another option in case you don't have that direct integration.
Mm-hmm. We're asking you in this poll, does Pearl meet your needs for lecture capture? We're split on that. Some people say yes, 50% say yes, and 50% say somewhat. What I want to know is if it's somewhat, let us know. Put your comments in the chat and we'll see if we can address those here. And if not, we'll take them back to our developers and find out what we can do to meet those needs, because we're always trying to find out how this can be the ultimate lecture capture solution. So,
absolutely.
Like I say, let us know. Wow, we're really at the questions already.
We are, yeah. This was a little bit more focused for our Pacific.
Yeah,
setup.
okay. That's fine. We don't always, so we sometimes do really long webinars. This one's a little bit shorter today, as it's a pretty straightforward topic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll address them. There's one here for you, Matt. Does Pearl 2 support NDI? What kind of NDI does Pearl 2 support?
It does support.
Sorry.
It does definitely support NDI. So Pearl 2 can support up to 4 NDI sources simultaneously. This would be a combination of inputs and outputs, or all inputs as an example. It does support NDI alpha, and I believe we're running 4.1 for NDI. I'll have to,
right.
I can't confirm that fully.
Sure.
I'd have to look back at notes, but feel free to reach out to us at info@epifan.com or jump on live chat on our website, and myself or another member of the support team will be happy to give you a hand there.
Mm-hmm. And that's NDI and NDI HX.
Correct, yes.
That's on Pearl 2 only, so that's not a Pearl Mini feature. Let's see if we have any. We don't actually have any other questions here. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll get to them, and if not, this will be a shorter webinar for us. So please join in the conversation. Let us know what you want to know about anything really to do with either our products or to do with lecture capture systems in general.
I would love to.
Because Matt, you talk to a lot of customers about their electric capture setups, no doubt.
I do. And actually, one of the biggest questions I have is if you're using another hardware-based electric capture solution now, and you're looking at our Pro family of products, what is the biggest reason that you're looking to adopt this chain? I mean, we do know that our products are fantastic and meet a lot of different needs, but I'm curious to know, what are some of the larger pain points that has made you interested in looking at our hardware solutions that you'd like to navigate away from? I know that some common ones that I've seen over the last little while, whether it's an IT professional or an administrative staff member, is just the fact that we don't have any sort of licensing or reoccurring fees that take place with our hardware devices, which is a great point to have. But the other big one that I often see is actually just the confidence monitoring from the touchscreen, the larger touchscreen, specifically with Pearl Mini.
Matt, there's a couple of questions here.
Love it. I'll take it.
So someone's asking us if the presentation will be available afterwards. Sure. Send us an email or live chat. We always get people asking us for us, and it's always readily available, so we'll share that with you.
Yep. We won't be able to get it to you right this minute, but as soon as this webinar is over, we'll make sure that we get a format available for you guys.
Here's a question we get a lot, and I'm sure you do as well. Will there be a replacement for our Webcaster X2?
The answer I have is we're looking into it, but I'm not sure as to if or when, because I'm not a member of the development team specifically. But I do know that we are investigating a number of different options to hopefully have something that is a little bit more direct as a replacement. That's
right. We have another person asking us a similar kind of question. When will be a new someone's asking if there will be a new version of Pearl Mini without an SD card or a locker. I'm not sure what locker is, but there won't be any new Pearl Mini without an SD card. That's going to be the storage solution for that device, for the rest of its life. And here, someone's asking, what's the signal path of delivery for this presentation, including hardware, software, CDN, and CMS?
It's a great question.
And any background system being pushed into Crowdcast. How are you using the technologies discussed to produce this online event? So we can show you a little diagram that explains how all of this works, but I can tell you we're not using Panopto or Kaltura for this. We're publishing directly using RTMP to Crowdcast. So Crowdcast is this webinar platform, and one of the things we like about it is that it does support RTMP streams. We can, you know what, why don't we save that little diagram for a minute? We'll dig into that in a minute, Matt. We can talk about the nuts and bolts of this webinar, but we could first get into some of these other questions if you have a second.
Sure, yeah.
We're using Panopto. Can we integrate college time table system to Pearl? Do you know what that means?
I don't, unfortunately. So Pearl is a standalone hardware solution, which does mean it does have some limitations because it is purpose-built. So no software applications or additional open integration is readily available. Now, we'd love to hear more about this specific table. The more information we have, the more resources we have available, the better we can understand what the everyday needs are for your specific use case and what other educational institutions might need. The more we understand, the more we can investigate whether it's a possibility of something we could integrate in the future. So, love the question. Please throw it into info.
And Panopto...
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I cut you off. No, I cut you off. We got a little latency here. I was just going to say there's a good chance that Panopto might be a way to integrate that, because Panopto and Kaltura have a tremendous amount of integrations with other services, so it's quite possible you could get Pearl to do what you want, but you'd actually be integrating your service that you want with Panopto.
Now, Kaltura and Panopto also have an amazing support staff. So if you do have questions about additional integrations with those specific platforms, I do recommend also reaching out to them. We've had members from both platforms on our show, on our live show multiple times, and even on an occasional webinar. So we do recommend that you utilize all those resources available if you have additional questions for those content management systems, especially if it's not something that we're able to readily answer.
Right. Someone's asking, how do the open source targets works, like YouTube, Facebook, or Crowdcast? So maybe you could just give a little primer on how we're doing this kind of live stream.
Sure. So Pearl offers open standard protocols for streaming, especially. Things like RTSP, RTMP, RTMPS, RTP-UDP, SRT, HLS, MPEG-, and so on. So basically, you can configure streams utilizing URL and stream keys and being able to point them directly at your target and destination. So as an example today, the Pearl that we have in studio in-house in the other room from where I'm sitting is currently programmed to point one stream to YouTube directly and another one to our Crowdcast platform, both using RTMP.
We have another question here. Someone asking, I think I can handle this one. Any updates on the USB signal light support? So like a tally light when using Panopto and Kaltura. And I know we're working on releasing a USB signal light support. I don't know the timeline of it, if it's a month or 2 months. It's not too far away, I know that much. So I'd say, yeah, something's going to be coming out soon, Magnus. But I'm not sure how that would work with Panopto and Kaltura specifically. So if you want to talk more about that, reach out to our support team. They will probably be able to answer those questions in greater detail than I can.
Now, I did want to go back to that. If you don't mind, George, I did want to go back to that question we said we were kind of circle back to as to how we're currently doing today's show.
Yeah.
So funny enough, George, you and I have actually talked about this in depth a little bit more in a previous webinar, as well as a live show that followed shortly thereafter the following week. But the way that we're currently doing everything from a remote perspective is we're utilizing a mix between conferencing software and hardware encoding device or hardware video sources to get this all complete. So right now, George and I initially have a backup of communication. So we currently speak through Zoom or conferencing style platforms so that we can make sure that we're having a candid conversation with as little delay as humanly possible. But in the last week and a half, we also released our firmware for 4.12 with our Pearl family of products, which also added SRT and HLS support. So George, who is sitting quite a few miles and kilometers away from the studio, is sending an SRT stream from a Pearl unit that he has in hand to the Pearl unit here in our studio. And I myself are just in-house today, but typically if I was at home, I would also be doing the same thing. So we'd have two separate video sources that are SRT streaming to a centralized Pearl. And then from there, we have our producer on staff who has created specified crops to be able to get everybody centralized as much as possible, to get them to the same size that they want to be using our custom layout builder. And then adding additional video sources such as the PowerPoint slide presentation, which comes from an additional video source that's being run from a computer here in the studio. So all of this can happen from multiple different locations with very little actual in-person interaction. I believe the most I had to do was come into the studio and turn the lights on.
It's kind of a complex setup what we're doing today, so we could probably talk about it for hours. In fact, we have. So I'd suggest if you're interested in exactly how we're doing this, check out our YouTube channel, and you're going to see some video called like how we do webinars or how something like that. And I think we have a live show coming up on that. Is that on Thursday this week? Is it how we're doing a webinar? Do you remember?
I think so. And if it's not this week, it'll be next week.
Yeah. Anyway, our YouTube channel is filled with videos about how we're doing this exact setup. So follow us up there. More questions. Okay. When someone creates an event centrally, will the recording come automatically into the Kaltura account?
Yes.
So this is from Ludo, wondering like what happens after this scheduled event finishes.
It's a great question, and it's one that we get quite often. So when you have a scheduled either webcasting or recording event, all of it will be recorded locally on the Pearl itself and then automatically uploaded to the Kaltura platform based on wherever the event was supposed to take place. So if it was a scheduled event, it'll show up in that specific folder. If this was an ad hoc based event, it'll show up in your My Files or My Folders section. Just a thing to keep in mind is that with any sort of upload that takes place, the longer the video, the longer it'll take to get to that specific platform. And there is a little bit of a delay between what happens locally on the Pearl unit and when you'll see it on the platform itself, just due to transcoding needs. So it can take a little bit of time. And that can take anywhere from 3 minutes to 45 minutes on average. And some of that additionally takes place with how many hundreds of thousands of people are actively using the platform simultaneously. The more traffic that's on there, the longer it's going to take to get from point A to point B. But it does get to where it's supposed to go at the end of the day.
Thank you, Matt. That was great. Another question. Will X2 or Pearl Mini be configured with a UVC output? to integrate with Teams or Zoom type collaboration tools. So I guess what they want is just a really easy way to output directly from a Pearl Mini, let's say, into my computer, so I can bring that feed into Zoom.
At the moment, our USB ports are essentially just used as capture options. So being able to connect USB-based storage if you want to manually copy or automatically copy files over or transfer them, or USB video and audio sources. So either a UAC or UVC style video source, so either a webcam or USB microphone. It is something that we've received multiple requests for in the past, but as I'm not a member of the development team, I can't say as to whether or not it is something that is going to be coming anytime soon or if we're looking into it at the time. But you can throw that question towards our email at info@epifan.com, and we can certainly investigate for that for you.
There might be some other ways that you're going to see that integration improve as well. We're looking in general about how to integrate well with those platforms, and one way that you'll be able to do it soon will be with NDI support, because Teams has announced that they're going to be supporting an NDI feed, which means for NDI capable devices like Pearl 2, you could send an NDI signal to a Teams meeting, and that might meet your needs, but not so much on the X2 and nor with the Pearl Mini, I'm afraid. So we've run through most of the questions here. We have a nice comment here from AVI Trainer talking about why Pearl is either a great fit or not such a great fit. So Matt, you should check that out in the chat here. Kind of explaining why X2 was a really good product for him because it was basic and simple and it met the needs, whereas Pearl's more complex and more costly. So that kind of makes sense. Like you need to buy the product that fits your budget and your needs. And Pearl Mini does a lot of things, but sometimes it's too much for some customers. So I do get that.
Of course.
Okay, I'm looking at the questions here. Somebody has mentioned regarding our question about using a Pearl Mini directly to a Teams or Zoom or something like that. You can use a capture card.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's how we do it when we're doing it in our studio. We'll run it a capture card. It's another expense, of course, but it does solve the problem really elegantly. We've kind of run out of our questions, I think. So if you have any more questions, now's the time. Put them in the chat.
And if you think of a question at a later date, throw it on our live chat on our website. You can throw us an email at info@epifan.com or support@epifan.com. Drop us a comment on one of our YouTube videos or on Facebook, and we're happy to answer that as soon as we are available to do that. We have a whole series of webinars coming up. I think we have to meet next week to decide the next round of webinars. So if there's things you want us to talk about, by all means, let us know there. But keep your eyes out on our website and our YouTube channel, and you'll see lots of new content on a regular basis. This has been kind of fun, Matt. It's our short and tidy webinar for today. So it's always nice to see you, George.
Get out. Yes, we can get out and enjoy this blazing hot heat.
Yes.
Which we're experiencing in the Ottawa region, which is where we're located. But I won't complain.
Well, you can, but nobody's listening.
Exactly. That's a better way of putting it. Thanks to everybody for filling out the polls. We have one final poll for you asking if you found the webinar helpful or useful. So let us know, and that helps us. So please, thanks to everybody for watching today.
Thank you for joining us.